But most people listen to us about Tesla, right? I mean, Tesla's the big name we want to talk about. We study that. We spend most of our waking, breathing hours thinking, analyzing, studying Tesla. Me and you, Matt, and many of the people who follow us, we're all obsessed with Tesla. I have been for 10 plus years now. I did put a tweet out that Roblox is another stock we follow is surging. I guess the street likes their monthly metrics numbers. We can talk about that later too. But Tesla, I mean, the big news is these price drops, the price cuts. I mean, insane. I mean, they're cutting the price probably for the. I mean, some of those stuff, like what is the Model 3 got cut by like 3 or 4 thousand, but the Model Y long range, which is their highest selling, most popular car, got cut by like what 13,000 or something like that.
Yeah, it was a
Um,
20% drop.
yeah, 20%. Then you add the 7,500. It's like a 30% drop, really, when you add this. So, but the Tesla is cutting themselves 20%. So like $13,000 off their highest. So let's just extrapolate on average, like $10,000 per car on average that they, some people are going to get the Model 3, which only had a 4,000 price drop. A lot of people are going to get the Model Y, 13,000. Let's just say it's 10,000. If they're selling 400,000 cars, let's say they're selling 200,000 cars in the US, okay? Best case, let's say, I don't know, 200,000, maybe 150. That would be like 1.5 to $2 billion of just cash giving away in a way, don't you think? I mean, if there's 150,000 to 200,000 cars in the US being sold in the quarter after a $10,000 loss in price because demand didn't support the higher price point. So many people say it's not Teslas have a demand. Of course, they have a demand issue. They would not cut the price if there was not a demand issue at this current time. So if they didn't need to cut the price, they would have had an extra 1.5 to $2 billion in their pocket. But they had to cut the price to get to sell as many cars as they can produce in the U.S. Right? I mean, is that math correct, Matt? Am I missing something?
Yeah, I mean, the absolute dollar value of the math isn't wrong. So yeah, I mean, if demand truly was unlimited, which seemed to be the case a year ago, and which a lot of people are even saying now, that it strikes me as totally bizarre that, like you're saying, that some bulls out there are saying Tesla doesn't have a demand issue. Because if they didn't have a demand issue, then they would not have cut prices.
Yeah,
It's like
economics
very
101.
it's so big, and Elon has even confirmed this. So even if you just don't believe us, I mean, Elon has said it. So
Yeah,
follow the cult leader, if not us.
yeah, yeah.
But it's just, yeah. I mean, very clearly, they did not have enough demand at those price points to
Mhm.
fulfill their need. Now, is that catastrophic news? And is the stock going to like get cut in half? No. I mean, and I've been spending a lot of time kind of digging into this, but it's very clear that they couldn't even maintain their current level of orders at the previous price points. This back in Q2, I think it was when they really had that crazy backlog, and they raised prices. Maybe it was Q1. I think it
Yeah,
was Q2.
yeah.
But they raised prices, and then the backlogs just started getting whittled down, and to the point in late Q4 where it was basically gone, the worldwide backlog. And so I think what that showed you is that the price increases that they had in effect for 6 to 9 months, there was never a sustainable order rate at those prices. Otherwise, the backlog would have just kept growing. And so, I think they raised prices in order to kind of chew through the backlog. And now that they've cleared it out and they've got more production coming online, very clearly they needed to lower prices in order to sustain delivery volumes. So yeah, no, it's not a good thing on the surface. As in, like, to your point, if there was unlimited demand, they'd have like $1 billion more in the U.S., probably more than that worldwide this year.
Yeah.
But it is a good thing in my mind, because in the real world, you do need to cut prices in order to,
Yeah.
it kind of advance or just to sell the product.
Yeah. I put a tweet out. My big complaint. I mean, in the real world, also, big companies do some type of advertising. And Tesla has always been kind of um, above that. From on a moral high ground, I would say, or something, or a principle, or something from Elon. And I've been a fan of that for up till now. I think giving away 1.5 to $2 billion of profit per quarter is not necessary. They could have put $100 million. They could have put 5 or 10% of that amount of money into traditional advertising commercials, just to educate, not to like trick or market. There's so much semantics around advertising. It seems like sneaky and tricking consumers and just trying to sell popular people, influencers using it or whatever. But maybe they just put out sort of like those infomercial commercials, that's not like that, where you're just saying, look, Tesla is the safest car despite what you see in the media. Tesla is cost effective. You don't have to go to gas stations or change oil ever. And charging is not as difficult as you might think. You can just charge at home every night and have 300 miles every morning when you wake up. Like if they just put those 3 points out in like some simple advertisements, like infomercials, like to the public, like if they do that, I think that'll do a ton for demand in, long term, medium term, long term, whatever, but medium term, they would not have needed to, you know, basically sacrifice $2 billion of margin per quarter for the next few quarters if they had just put these commercials out. In my opinion,
I
I think it's worth
yeah.
testing an A/B test or something at least.
I completely agree. I mean, the fact that they didn't even dip their toe into that's what, I find particularly upsetting. I mean,
Yeah,
we don't need
yeah,
to go like full on, crazy like traditional auto OEM marketing budget and like do Super Bowl ads. But you saw
yeah,
how effective the Super Bowl ads were for Tesla last year when all the other
yeah,
companies, it was like
yeah,
there was a direct translation to their order book.
yeah,
So why not try, spending $20 million, like you said, just to educate and because we're still so early on in the adoption curve, and still so many people that I
yeah.
talk to who aren't in this bubble think, oh, you can't drive, long road trips in
So they're
EVs.
not safe. They're
It,
not safe. They
it,
burn up in fires or something. Yeah,
exactly. So there's just so much misunderstanding about the ownership experience that there's some really low hanging fruit that like a really
yeah,
well put together 30-second like if you had 5 different 30-second things that would just be like a
yeah,
guy talking to his neighbor about like, oh, aren't EVs like, isn't it awful to be charging at a public station all the time? He's like, well, no, isn't it awful to go charging at a gas station all the time?
yeah,
Just like a little
yeah,
back and forth with that. So like get
yeah.
people
That'd be a
thinking, and
great
like the
idea.
same thing on the maintenance, like do the same thing on the safety. There's
Yeah,
so many highlights that people just are not aware of.
yeah.
And it seems like low hanging fruit that
Very
Tesla
low
really
hanging.
could try, and if they try it and it doesn't work, great, we learned something. But if they
Yeah.
try it and it works, then okay, maybe you don't have to lower prices so much.
Yeah, you don't
So
have to sacrifice $2 billion a quarter, $5 to $10 billion of profit this year. Like basically they're just giving away $5 to $10 billion because they
yeah.
don't want to advertise. That's how I see it.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, it's got such a strong brand name too. I think it really would be like the Apple advertisements when that used to be a big thing in like the
Yeah,
2000s, with all like the
yeah,
dancing with like the
yeah,
iPod and all that. I mean, those
yeah.
were really great commercials, and I think
Those
Tesla
weren't really like
could do
those
the
weren't
same.
like Tesla doesn't need to do with that. Those weren't like really infomercial commercials. Those are just like kind of
Yeah,
branded, like kind of cool, slick. I mean, I like that. That's true. But Tesla doesn't need to go there. I think Tesla just needs to inform us, inform the
yeah,
public. In our bubble, everyone watching this in our bubbles, we all know Tesla. There's so many people. You talk to, and Uber drivers, were commenting on my Twitter thread about that, saying like, yeah, I drive my Tesla Uber all the time. When I pick people up, they have no idea what the heck's going on. They think it's unsafe. They think it's hard to charge. I have to educate everyone.
yeah,
Like half the people he picks up, he has to try to educate them on what's going on. So you get some of that. We're doing the best we can as early adopters of Tesla, but we can only spread the word so quickly, amongst
yeah,
ourselves with our family and our networks. It's not fast enough to keep up with the growing production capacity in this recessionary environment for Tesla to meet its, for demand to meet its growing production capacity. So I think just some traditional advertising would go a long way. Like you said, low hanging fruit. It seems absurd that they don't try it to me in the US, like at this point, like maybe 5 years ago when they were getting ready for the Model 3, or they're tiny and it costs a lot of money, but they have all this money in the, instead of doing a $10 billion
yeah,
buyback, they could do $100 million of advertising and give a $9 billion share buyback, and they wouldn't have to lower prices, and we'd have a buyback too. So basically, we're sacrificing a lot. As a business owner of Tesla, which all of us shareholders are, we all can opine on this stuff. And to me, I think like Elon in his head, he's principled and he sees the big long-term picture. The end justifies the means in terms of business or whatever, and he wants to give the price break to the consumers. Blah blah blah. Like Tesla will be great in the long term, no matter what. Kind of thing. But I disagree. And maybe he also like maybe the idea of like doing case studies on Tesla in the future, like, hey, you could be a great business and never have to do advertising. Like, what a case study that would be,
yeah.
like, so I just don't like it. I think they should try traditional advertising. It would just help the general public perception, and grow adoption faster. I mean, advanced, sustainable transport accelerate the a sustainable transport is the mission, right? Don't you
Yeah.
think some traditional advertising would accelerate it? I think so.
Yeah. So, I mean, on the flip side of this, though, I mean, if you're GM or Ford or Toyota and you've got to
Yeah,
compete against the Model Y and the Model 3 at these prices, especially in the US with the incentives on top of that,
yeah, yeah.
like,
They're
oh
in
my
trouble.
gosh, like,
Yeah,
so from a competitive standpoint, boy, does it put the pressure on those other guys.
that is true. That is
So,
true.
so to me, it seems like they have secured their ability to, deliver as many cars as they can produce, at least for 2023 with this
Hmm.
pricing. So that part of it, I think is good, but maybe it didn't need to be quite so painful on margins in the short term. But I don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, have you thought about the competitive dynamics now and how that changes with like if you're trying to buy a crossover and you got to compare, like as far as I'd put a couple tables out, I don't have them right in front of me, but like a Rav4 Ice versus a Model Y, like, isn't the math just so much easier now?
Um, I do think, the demand just from the price, the organic demand increase from a price cut is very substantial. When you see I saw some analysis that says, like, the end of December, after Shell had that initial price cut, for the last like 10 days of December, the price now, when you include the Inflation Reductionary Act with that price cut, is 20% lower than it was at the end of December. And or now you could say it's like 30% lower than it was before the price cut. So when you do the math, I think there's like demand does not increase proportionally to the price. Like some might speculate, oh, well, that means demand went up 30%, or I saw someone say like demand should be about double, maybe that, so 60%. I think demand might go up 100% plus just from the $30,000 price cut. The 30% price
Yeah.
cut, the $20,000 price cut. The 30% price cut, I could see demand being 100%. The sustainable demand, given like the current economic environment, say that assuming that stays the same, would be 100% more. And so that demand is taken from the competitors, like you said,
Hmm.
GM, and then it's also taken from not just the EV offerings, but the obviously the internal combustion engine offerings at those price points. So demand might even be 200% or 300% increase, just from a $20,000 price cut. It's hard to say, but I'd say it's a lot more than 20% increase in demand from a
Yeah.
20% price cut. I mean,
So I
yeah.
remember this old rule of thumb, which might be dated right now, and it's possible I have it slightly mixed up, but it was something to the effect of for every $10,000 you drop in a vehicle market segment, so from 40 to 30 or 30 to
Hmm.
20, you double the addressable market within that segment, which makes
Yeah.
sense because obviously the market for a $25,000 like base version. I mean, probably 25,000 is too low now, but like a Camry or whatever, a Camry or a Accord, like the most popular selling cars that are $30,000 is I don't know how much larger, but drastically larger than the market for like a $50,000 BMW whatever of a similar size. So yeah, if you drop by $20,000, maybe you 5x or 4x, or maybe it's just 2x the market, but very significant increase in overall demand. And the other thing that I think, to the point we were saying earlier about just the overall market education, is people still I don't think appreciate the total cost of ownership difference between the EVs and ICE vehicles. So people are still comparing sticker price, but you're not changing oil. The fuel cost is like a third of what it
Yeah.
is for gasoline. And
Yeah.
so yeah, it's just there's
Charge at
it's
home every
more
night,
than just the
convenience.
sticker. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And a little bit of traditional advertising, I think, would go a long way for that. So and what's interesting is, do you think in the US that GM is gonna have to lower the price of the Mach E, for example, now? Or do you think they're gonna keep the same price, or what?
Well, I'm not sure what their production is. I mean, because if they're like 10,000 units a year or something like that, then they probably don't need to cut prices to keep selling that few. But if
Yeah.
they have ambitions to get to, Model Y types of sales figures, then of course they're going to have to cut. It would have to be priced a lot cheaper than a Model Y, I think, in order to get to those comparable levels. And they're
Yeah.
not going to be profitable doing that. So, I kind of think that they're going to stay with the production targets that they have.
Yeah.
And,
And
and as long as, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say Raymond Chan mentioned, which I was going to bring up to you, that in China, the competitors like XPeng just lowered their price by like $5,000 or $6,000 for their main car. So, do you think it seems like the Chinese competitors might be moving to lower their price to kind of keep up with Tesla, which seems like impossible for them. I mean, don't you think they're going to be? I would think they're going to be like losing money, those Chinese competitors, but maybe they have no choice because they've already been building up this inventory. If they don't lower price, they just won't get the demand to sell the car, and then they're screwed more than selling it at a small loss, right? I mean, so I'm wondering if GM and Ford are going to have to do something similar with and Volkswagen are going to have to do something similar and just lower the price, even though they're going to lose money now or more money.
Yeah. So the Chinese market is way more competitive than the US market right now.
Yeah.
There were a bunch of new models released in the last 6 months or so. So that, dynamic is really aggressive right now.
Mhm.
Much more so than in the United States. So I think it might be a race to the bottom more so in China in terms of gross margins for all these players
Mhm.
than it will be for in the US market. Because I think like China might have 50. I saw somewhere somebody said that China might have 50% EV sales this year. That sounds too aggressive to me, but call it
50%?
20.
No way. Yeah, that seems
That's
low.
what I thought. So I think there was somebody that had a market forecast of saying 2025 they'd get to 50% market share, which like that's still pretty aggressive. Um, but since some other market commentator said that it would happen this year, but let's just say 2025, for example, that's way faster than is going to happen in the United States. Um, so it's just it's a it's a much different overall environment.
Mhm. Absolutely. All right. So, I mean, the cost of goods services is going to decrease obviously as they ramp up. I mean, and we're back to kind of a deflationary environment. It seems like for commodities and chips perhaps and all that. I mean, um, Giga Berlin and Austin are ramping up, so they should be getting more efficient. Have you modeled out or have you speculated on the cost of goods services, cost of goods sold, what those decreases might be like, or how they could help offset the price decrease?
Yeah, so I've been looking at it in detail, and it's kind of tricky because we're looking at what's going to happen in Q1, but we still don't have the Q4 data yet. We'll have that next week, obviously after the earnings call. But there are a lot of things that I think are going to be tailwinds in terms of reducing cost of goods sold. So the biggest one probably is the raw material cost decreases that have been coming down for the last 6 to 12 months, kind of depending on which commodity you're looking at. But steel, aluminum, lithium carbonate's a really big one, which has really been decreasing lately. And all these prices are coming down, so that's going to lower the cost of goods sold across the board. But then on top of that, you've got higher throughput in Shanghai in particular, because that was, I mean, in Q3, which is our last data
Yeah.
point. They were in the middle of that ramp, so we didn't have a full quarter of the higher production volume to kind of flow through the cost of goods sold. So that will help too. And then obviously Berlin and Austin ramping, those were definitely dragging down overall gross margins. And so you've got all these factors kind of coming together, plus continued improvements within the factories, like all the giga castings which have been worked on right now, and all these other kind of continuous improvement practices which Tesla puts in place. So I think it's fair to assume that there's going to be at least $2,000 of cost of goods sold savings. But
Hmm.
it's so hard to say exactly when these savings would kind of change through or adjust. So the math that I've been doing is it's still very much up in the air, like I was saying. But you're taking prices down. Maybe it's an average of 10% worldwide, something like that. Um, and your
Hmm.
cost of goods sold is going to come down some amount less than that. So you'll have
Hmm.
margin pressure a little bit. Um, I think the kind of range that I think is likely to see the gross margin decrease, I think it's probably 2.5% to 5%. I think 5% is probably on the high end. So, if you're talking about going from the high 20s, so like 28, 29% in recent quarters to, like the mid 20s, 22, 23 or something like that, possibly even staying in the 25% range, depending
That'd
on,
be great.
cost of goods sold. Yeah. Which would be a huge win. It's just been funny, like looking at, because my gut reaction when these price cuts came out was, oh man, this is going to absolutely destroy margin. And my
Yeah.
thinking was, okay, you've got roughly 15,000 of margin per car, less than that, a little bit less than that, maybe. And you're going to cut prices by $5,000 to $10,000. It's like, oh, that's like a third of your profits gone. But when you
Yeah.
actually do the math, and so a lot of people were thinking, okay, gross margins in the teens, and that was kind of where my head went at first. Was just like, 15, 16, 18% gross margin, something like that for all of
Mhm.
2023. That was just my gut take. But then when I started actually modeling it out, and I always try to be middle of the road with these numbers, it was not nearly that drastic. So
Yeah.
which was a surprise to me. And you've seen some Tesla Q folks. There's this one guy who he just, his math was, he took the 25% auto gross margin and said, okay, there's a 15% price cut. So that means that gross margins are going to be 10% going forward. I'm just like, that is not how that math works at all. So I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of like a lot of Tesla Q are just like rubbing their hands like, this is it. Like the moment I've finally been waiting for, like Tesla to finally go bankrupt.
Yeah.
So
Meanwhile, the stock is ripping now. 130 we've broken. Seems again maybe the second time for today. Maybe we'll stay above it this time. 130.26 as we talk. So it's a good day. Finally,
wow,
we're talking on another day where the stock is actually recovering and coming up. So
we
130
broke the
still
trend
super
last
low.
week.
Yeah. We're close to 30% higher than the low. Isn't that kind of crazy when you think about it that way? Like the low was like what, 101 or 102 just a couple weeks ago or a week or two ago. And now we're at 130. So it's like 30% higher and like pretty quickly. I feel like that the lows are in. I don't know. I don't feel like we're going to go dip below 100 now. It feels like hard to fathom at this point. Um, from just
Yeah,
trading perspective.
I agree. I mean, I think at this point it would take, Drew Dixon made this point, and I agree with him. I think it would take fundamental misses from Tesla to
Yeah.
make the lows go lower. So if
Like if their
my
Q4
estimates on every
margins were like way below everyone's estimate, maybe,
yeah,
right?
you can imagine like if their Q4 margins were like 20%, 22%, and then they had to cut prices on top of that, like, oh man,
Oh,
that'd be a huge red flag.
yeah.
So yeah, in that case, I
Yeah.
could absolutely see prices going down, but I think that's really unlikely. Um,
Yeah. Well, we got to do maybe next Tuesday, we can do kind of your quarterly model preview
yeah, sure. Yeah,
on
we should
this,
definitely do
just to
that.
walk through it the day before earnings. Yeah. So, so anyway, yeah, I mean, also the other news is Elon Musk, right? I mean, I guess he's going on trial starting today in San Francisco here, like with the taking Twitter private. Taking Tesla private
Yeah.
tweet he put out a few years ago. I,
Mhm.
this seems so silly that this has gone this far to like what shareholders are taking him to court over this short, obviously it's really short sellers. It's like
Yeah, I mean, it's
it's just so
funded by the
ridiculous.
lawyers. Yeah.
It's funded by the lawyers who are probably incentivized by, you know, just getting money. And I would think no one should be upset about it. No long term, no right minded. If you're a short term speculator, maybe you were upset somehow. I don't know, but if you're an investor in Tesla and investor means like long term in my mind. If most general public, I would think thinks of an investor as someone who owns the stock for more than a few years. You're an investor. You're not just some like
Yeah.
short term speculator. So if you're an investor, you're doing great. If Tesla had come back down, never came back up to 420 again, okay, maybe there's a case to be made somehow. Like you bought it on the way up at 400 and thought it was going to go up beyond, but now it's back at 200. But now split adjusted, it's like $2,000 a share. Why
Yeah.
would you be upset that he's thinking about? You should be happy that he didn't actually take it private. Like it's I don't. It doesn't make sense to me. I mean, do you have any thoughts about this trial right now? Do you think it's a risk?
Yeah, so I haven't been following it too closely. I do think it could be a risk. I don't know the numbers on this, but somebody was saying, if he loses and has to pay damages, he could have to sell more shares, and so there could be that whole debacle. I don't get the sense that it would be that much of like a negative stock impact. But just overall, I completely agree with you. It's like
The
this.
plaintiff owns 8 shares, according to Raymond Chen on the Twitter. I don't know if anyone
So
else has more
so
information in the comments.
so yeah. Well, I heard that. I heard it was like 3 shares pre-split or something like that. So
Oh,
maybe 8 now. It just so it's so ridiculous. It's very clearly not in this guy's best interest to be going through this. But there's all these lawyer fees involved, and so people have incentive to go through this. But it's
yeah.
not it's not at
And
all
they
for
want
the
a
benefit of
settlement. They obviously
shareholders.
want a settlement. I don't think they want a settlement, right? I mean, the lawyers would love Elon just to say, okay, I'll
Yeah.
pay 500, 100 million to make this go away. Here's your cut. And the lawyers get 50 million of that or whatever, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so I think he's going to try to fight against this. He's been
I
really
think so.
successful at doing that in the past.
Yep.
Especially we've seen how passionate he gets on this topic in particular because he did have
Yeah.
the funding secured, at least in his mind, with the
Yeah.
Saudis, and then the SEC came kind of and really backed him into a corner. And so this is a really emotional um, topic for Elon. So I think he's gonna
Yeah.
like fight this just on the principles. So I hope he wins, but we'll see what happens. Do you think it's a risk? What are your kind of thoughts on the how it might impact?
I actually think it's close to zero risk because there's a jury deciding on
Even in
this.
San Francisco, though, because that was the one thing where he was trying to get out of there.
Yeah. No, even in San Francisco, it's harder to pick a balanced jury, obviously, in San Francisco. That's like so highly, left leaning, and the left hates Elon right now, obviously. So, but I think you'll find people, and I think they've selected a jury that was probably the most important part of this trial is selecting the jury. And there's even like articles written about the selecting of the jury or something. and I think
Yeah,
everyone knows as long as there's a couple of people on that jury that are sensible, then I don't think, in my mind, sensible. Sure, I think more than half the jury would be sensible, to be honest, even in San Francisco. But I think as long as there's at least a couple people that are like, this is ridiculous. How is this? We can't prosecute Elon. This is terrible. Then he gets out of it. It's just a pain in the butt for him to have to show up and testify on Wednesday and all this stuff. And I think he's okay with that. But yeah, so I think that's what's going to happen. It'll be just a jury of peers that are informed by both sides, not by the media. And when they get both sides information, they'll make sensible, logical conclusion that this is a ridiculous case to bring forward, and it's throw it out. Be like, get rid of this, and then hopefully the lawyers learn. Let's not try to do these types of lawsuits against Elon because he fights him and wins.
yeah. Well, I mean, if they keep getting paid, even if they lose, they, I don't know.
Or do they get paid if they lose? I don't think they
Well,
do. I think a lot of these
it
lawyers
depends on
just
who's paying.
automatically.
Like, it,
Yeah, maybe
it,
someone's
it could,
funding them to do it.
yeah, that could be the case. So I don't know. I mean, this is a bit of speculation, but
Yeah,
like I think most lawyers wouldn't do this, just on the betting on the come, essentially, that they can win and get some huge payday, and if they lose, they get nothing. I'd imagine
yeah,
there are some people who are kind of funding this legal
yeah.
effort.
131 just broken, by the way. 131 broken, going up. All right, I like this. This is nice
I
trends
like
we're
it, but I'm a
having.
long way from celebrating. I say that.
Oh, me too. Me too. As long as we're just going in the right direction, I feel like
Yeah.
my blood pressure is lower. So just keep my blood pressure low, please. All right. Um, Anything else, Elon, we wanted to talk about, or anything else Tesla we want to talk about before we kind of move on, Matt? Anything you think of?
No, just looking through the outline. No, I don't think so. I mean, the only other thing that we had on our list was the FSD Beta V11. So this was the single
Yes.
stack. Elon,
Hmm.
I was looking at some old tweets. Elon was actually promising this in February of last year, and then it just
Yeah.
kept getting delayed. And then in December, he said it'd be 2 weeks, and so then I think in January, was it like 2 weeks ago? He said it'd be maybe 2 weeks. So maybe like 3 weeks from now, we might actually have it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I was
You know what
trying to
I
think
noticed?
today. What's
One thing I
that?
noticed, remember he made that comment in his tweet about like the neural nets will be affecting other controls or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, like
Um,
navigation and stuff too.
yeah, one thing it might have done too is I noticed it this morning. Like I had just coming back from a trip over the weekend, a long road trip over the weekend. I was driving, and I think on the radio we just had like I was driving back last night with my kids in the car. They were like watching something in the screen in the back, which is kind of cool for the road trips. They were watching some like Disney show
Mhm.
or something, and I didn't have any like anything on. Like, anyway, I was listening to music earlier in the front and all that. Anyway, this morning I get in to take the kids to school, and as soon as I get in, not only does the school show as like the first option to select, which has been going on for a while, which is nice. I don't have to like pull up, write the name just to see what the traffic's going to be like going there and stuff. But also, it automatically, for the first time I noticed this, it automatically set the media, the sound, to what I normally listen to when I'm taking them to school, which is CNBC or Bloomberg. I think it put it on CNBC because I'm always in tune in CNBC and Bloomberg, and I'm switching between the
Really?
two while I'm taking the kids to school, just to kind of listen to that while I'm talking to my kids and stuff, or have them kind of listen to the news, with me. But yeah, it automatically set the radio to the station I usually like to listen to going to school, which is, I don't know if that's neural network or what, but somehow it knew that, and it's the first time I noticed that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so I haven't noticed that. I haven't been driving a whole lot lately, though. To be honest with you, I've been holed
yeah,
up at the home office for the most part. But I do think this has been such a long time in the making, and this isn't. So this is the first time the public's going to get this V11, but he called it what, like V11.4 or something like that.
yeah,
So
yeah.
there must have been several major overwrites of this stuff, and they just said, you know what, we can't release this. Like it's much more important to get the releases right than to get the releases out fast.
Hmm.
Because if you've got one bad accident that changes public opinion, it's just it could be a total disaster for the whole company. So
Like that
um,
Thanksgiving Day one, like that was sort of, everyone has been highlighting that happened, the day after. You saw that video of that car kind of slowing down in the San Francisco Bay Bridge tunnel there.
I
Did you see
don't know
that
that I
video?
did see that one
It
actually.
was like a phantom braking accident,
Oh, okay.
claimed as a phantom braking where the car like suddenly slowed down and caused like an 8-car pileup and a few people got injured. It was on like Thanksgiving Day, like the day after or the day before. Elon said, "Yeah, we released a new version. It's even better now," or something. Everyone's making a big deal
Okay.
about this accident.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, Elon made a comment recently that the pace of improvement of their AI systems is actually really accelerating right now. And so yeah, it's been ridiculously slow so far to get these updates, but the V11 is such a core rewrite of just about everything that once this goes, I really do think we're going to start to see a really improved pace of improvement in the actual driving experience. So I really can't wait to see this and see what it's capable of doing.
So
Because I
this is
think
like
the
the
more
single
like
stack. This is like supposed to be the
yeah,
single stack version of event that we finally get, that we've been talking about for over a year now.
yeah, with actually smart summon, maybe I don't know if they'll actually include
Yeah,
that or not, but the
yeah.
the logic of doing the whole kind of single stack rewrite it's a really big undertaking, obviously, because it's got to be comparable to or better than the old stack, which had been optimized over many years before it really makes sense to release it. So um, I I'm just very excited for this because I do think we're gonna like the improvements that we saw over the course of 2022 were pretty good, but I think the improvements that we're gonna see in 23 and beyond are gonna be like very like accelerated.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. We'll see. I mean, maybe they want to release this before the 25th, before the Q4 shareholder call, so they can put it in the shareholder letter, like version 11 just released and XYZ about it, because
Yeah,
I
I
feel like
think
they
they
don't want to,
will.
they're not going to want to talk about it in the shareholder letter, the conference call, opening remarks or anything if they haven't actually released it yet, I don't think. So, um, definitely released before Investor Day, March 1st. I mean, you got to think that self-driving technology is going to be talked about as part of the Investor Day. So